good. Welcome to our webinar. Hope everyone is doing fine. The webinar is called Inclusion in the Pandemic. My name is Ndileka. I'm the Program Manager at Solution Space in Philippi. I'll be facilitating today's conversation. I'll now hand over to my colleague, Ms. Sheila Yabo, who is the Program Manager at Solution Space at the Waterfront, to give you an official welcome and frame the conversation going forward.
Thank you so much, and Ndileka, thank you for everyone that has joined this conversation. You can hear me, right? I'm not muted. I'm not muted. So a lot of you might be asking yourself what city resilience has to do with the pandemic and what entrepreneurs are going through, especially in the township. So we organized this webinar so that we have a conversation about what we are going through as a country and as a nation, and to just reflect on how policies, and I think especially around what we've learned during the lockdown, how cities are designed, how policies are designed, and just to unpack what goes on behind that, and also give the platform for people that are going through all of this, especially in social entrepreneurship, and particularly entrepreneurship that is happening in the townships. I think before we go into what the conversation will be, I would like our panelists to introduce themselves. We have Dana Rissley and Alforde Charumbira, who are part of Uthando Impact Solutions. We also have a social entrepreneur, Sandiswa Gwele, who is the CEO of L&S Shuttle. I will not introduce them on their behalf. I like it when people tell their own stories. So to open up, Dana, maybe you can tell us a bit about yourself. I just want to highlight also that all the panelists are alumni of the GSB. So it's great to see products of our school out there championing for entrepreneurship and really coming back to share their expertise with us. So Dana, if you can kick us through, tell us a bit about yourself and the work that you have been doing with social entrepreneurs.
Yeah, thanks, Sheila. So hi, everyone. My name is Dana. So I'm a partner at Uthando, which is a company that Alfie and I started probably 2 to 3 years ago now. We were both studying at the GSB, doing our MBA part-time, and shared an interest in the social impact space. So started having conversations around what's happening. You know, Alfie had done some work in the US with social impact, and I had done some work, you know, both in South Africa and a little bit in the US through not-for-profits. So we had started mapping out, you know, what's happening in that space, and what we realized, and what Uthando means in Swahili, is cobweb. So there's just a lot of different activities and interventions happening, and we really wanted to start to bring those together. So we started on that journey, really just trying to make positive change in the world. And what we had started working on more intensively in this past year is an impact measurement tool. So I have a background in finance. I'm a CPA in the US. Alfie also has a background in finance, and I'll let him tell his story more about how he's moved from there. But so we have this measurement tool, and we wanted to help bring both qualitative and quantitative measurement to impact that's happening, to encourage more of it, and to really demonstrate the positive change that could happen through intervention. But during COVID-19, you know, we kind of sat down when lockdown first started and said, okay, so what can we do now? You know, what in our sphere of influence can we start to impact? So we set up a series of conversations, which I'll get into later, with social enterprises, NPOs, NGOs, all are South African based, just to understand, you know, what were they going through, how were they handling the crisis, and we started to see some best practices emerge, and we're still having these conversations. We have another one set up for next week, and so we try to put those out there, and then so I'll go through and just share with the group later what we've learned through those conversations. So that's my story. Thanks, Sheila.
Thank you so much, Dana. Alfie? You are muted.
Hi, Sheila. Apologies for that.
Yes.
Thanks for setting this up. So, like Dana said, we you know, at Uthando, this idea of Uthando came about from the thinking that, first of all, poverty cannot be acceptable. It's not a normal. And then, how do we stop all these events that are happening, and how do we stop someone born in poverty, and how do we stop a circumstance that someone is born into from turning into a destiny for them? And this is more of a personal issue for me, because I think I speak from a lived experience, in the sense that my personal life has really been I think a constant pivot, so to speak, or more like a push and pull. Does an opportunity for me mean that there is an opportunity lost for someone else that's coming from the same background? And I thought that this cannot be. There should be a way to create enough opportunity for every one of us. And I know these are tough conversations, but I think the idea was we need to adjust our thinking. We need to do better. We need to hold ourselves accountable for the world we create. And so this thinking and this idea that there is a way to create opportunity for everyone, and how do we make the world a better place, then influenced the birth of Uthando Social Impact, where then Dana, Rissley, and myself are working together in trying to impact lives and kind of changing that status quo. And so in addition to the impact measurement tool that Dana has spoken about, we're also just passionate about how cities and communities are designed, and why, and how we can kind of start thinking about changing that status quo and saying, hang on, maybe there are things that are fundamentally wrong, about systematic issues really that are fundamentally wrong about the way our cities and communities are designed, and how can we start thinking about changing those for the betterment of everyone. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to unpack that and share some of the insights that have come from the work that we're doing at Uthando.
Thank you so much. Before we go into the conversation, I have so many questions already for both of you. I'll just give Sandiswa a chance to just introduce yourself and the work that you've been doing with L&S. And I know you recently launched a foundation. So if you can tell us a bit about that. You are muted, so unmute.
Thank you, Sheila, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sandiswa Gwele. I am the CEO of L&S Shuttle Services. L&S is a family business. It's a transport and tourism company that's based at Philippi Village. We have been now operating for 5 years, and we have grown from just being a family business of my husband and I to 9 full-time staff members and 2 part-time staff. And last year, I've also started my NPO called Ocana Foundation. It's a second chance program where we support learners who failed matric. We give them space and we support them in many ways, such as tutoring, self-development, connecting them with opportunities, and just unlocking their potential and walking the journey with them so that they can succeed in life, irrespective of them failing the matric. Or the approach that we also use is turning the failure into a gift. How can they use this opportunity and turn it into a gift and succeed still in life?
Thank you so much. This is so interesting, and I'm already seeing a thread in what all of you have spoken about. Alfie said something powerful about how poverty, even though in South Africa and in many African countries, it seems like it's normal. Everyone continues as if it's normal, even when you have resources and you see someone that doesn't, it's normal. It has become that. And it's great to hear about also what Sandy has been talking about. How do we look at, the mistakes of the past and realize that we are here now, and as people that have access to those resources, as entrepreneurs in the townships and everywhere, how do we make sure that we are not leaving anyone behind? So, I know, Alfie, you've been very vocal about what the City Resilience Framework is. And I think in the context of South Africa, where, we all know from, I don't know what the year was when, Group Areas Act was introduced. And it's so sad to see that even today, that is how the majority of South Africans are left behind. The most vulnerable and the poor are still furthest from resources, are still furthest from developed urban areas. And can you please unpack what the city resilience is and what you've observed with the decisions made by the government? I think particularly with resource allocation, disseminating information, and just what entrepreneurs in the township, I think also just people in the township, what the experience has been, what you've observed.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Sheila. So the City Resilience Framework was a brainchild of the Ocana Foundation and the RIP Group. And the idea behind the City Resilience Framework was born out of purpose. So by purpose, we are saying, what is the purpose of building a community? What are the qualities that we need in terms of building a resilient system? And there are a couple of them. So I'll try and touch on some of those qualities of resilient systems, especially as they relate to African countries, and particularly South Africa, and maybe even some of the specific cities, say, for example, like Cape Town. So with resilient systems, first of all, it's interesting you mentioned the historical element to it, because in designing a resilient community, a resilient city, a resilient society, we have to be reflective, number one. So we have to think about how history has shaped the way our communities are designed and how our communities are functioning to this day. So historically, for example, in South Africa, we all know that, our cities were designed based on color and economic means. So what that meant is the poor and vulnerable were furthest away from resources. They were furthest away from healthcare systems, for example, particularly when we think about COVID-19. The vulnerable groups, the poorer people and people of color, were segregated on the basis of that. So now, when we think about disasters and pandemics like COVID-19, what that means then is the vulnerable members of our communities, the poorer people of our communities, and I really don't like using that word, but that's what it is. They are the most removed from resources, and therefore they lack the means and resources to cope with pandemics such as COVID-19. So when we reflect on this history, we can clearly see that we cannot continue with this type of city design. We cannot continue with this type of community design. We cannot continue with this type of living, because it's not designed for shocks like these pandemics like COVID-19. The poorer people will be the most vulnerable. Now, the second thing about resilient systems is they have to be robust. And we're talking about anticipating potential failures in the system and then making provisions to ensure that these failures are predictable. And again, the vulnerable can be safe, and that there is no disproportionate distribution of resources to help in coping with pandemics such as the COVID-19. And then the third thing about it is resilient systems have to be resourceful. So we need to invest in capacity to anticipate future conditions. We need to set priorities right. We need to be able to respond by mobilizing resources and coordinating wider human and financial resources. So we need this resourcefulness to be able to cope with pandemics such as COVID-19. But if we do not have resource allocation into the communities that are most vulnerable, then what that means is our cities, our communities cannot be resourceful enough to survive COVID-19. And this is why the theme has come up over and over again in terms of families that are going without food in our communities, families going without PPE in our communities, social entrepreneurs going without resources in our communities, to the extent that they have not accessed some of the resources that that have been supposedly availed to some of the entrepreneurs. We talk about redundancy when we talk about resilient systems as the fourth point. So by redundancy, we are saying as we design our communities, as we design our cities, we need to have extra capacity to deal with situations such as the COVID-19. And we're talking about, for example, hospital construction. So when we build hospitals, do we have enough extra beds to accommodate sick people when pandemics such as COVID-19 strike? And the reality is in the poor communities of South Africa, we do not have that redundancy. The healthcare system is already under pressure way before disasters such as this strike. And so again, that speaks to an issue around how our cities are designed and how we lack some of these fundamentals of resilient systems when it comes to talking about our communities. We talk about flexibility, and this is through sharing of knowledge and technology, and incorporating communities and indigenous people into decision making, which frankly has not come through in the conversations that we've been having with some of the social entrepreneurs, as Dana mentioned. So do we again have that flexibility in terms of how we communicate and how we disseminate information? Is it filtering through to the vulnerable groups of our communities? We talk about integration, and we know that integration is a massive issue, because again, there's just not enough in mutually agreeable investment strategy when it comes to improving the lives in the communities. And inclusiveness, the last one, is really one that touches to the core of my heart, because what we need in terms of inclusiveness is that we need shared ownership of solutions. We need shared ownership of problems. We need to accept that the way our cities again are designed, the way our communities are designed, the way our resources are allocated is not equal. It's not equal. So how do we bring that equality and inclusiveness into understanding the problem? So do we have those tough conversations with across the board? How do we bring about inclusiveness in terms of decision making? So do we listen to those voices? Do we say, well, let's make a decision together? Or do we come up with solutions, what we would call desktop solutions, and take them to our community and say, hey, here is the solution we have developed for you? And when we talk about, again, just even post-COVID-19, we need to build better. We need to think better. We need to realize that even before COVID-19, we had systematic failures in terms of healthcare delivery, education delivery, and economic opportunity. And so I think that through our work at Uthando and using some of the frameworks we're using, I think that if we take these points from the city resilience framework and say, how can we use reflectiveness, resourcefulness, robustness, redundancy, flexibility, integration, and inclusiveness? How do we bring all these elements into the design of our communities, into the design of our cities, and into creating economic opportunity for every one of our citizens?
Thank you so much. I wish we had the whole day to to go through each and every point, because I think this is where we need to be. And I wish you know, some of our government people were sitting here with us listening to what is going on. I know that, Dana, you are very passionate about how do we work with social entrepreneurs, how do we reimagine what support is, not just the financial side, but what do people really need, you know, to thrive and to continue with the great work that they are doing. Before I come to you, I want to give Sandy, I know that you have been at the forefront of fighting and giving social entrepreneurs and township entrepreneurs the voice. I don't know how many, I've lost count of how long we've been in lockdown, but when the government announced the business relief schemes, we saw a missing gap. And I think for me, it wasn't a surprise. It has been missing. Anyway, I feel that when people are sitting there, they're making decisions. Sometimes we make decisions from a place of privilege, because, you know, this is what makes sense for us, but what does it make, what makes sense for someone that is on the ground? And I want to give you, Sandy, time to express what you've been going through as an entrepreneur and some of the entrepreneurs that you've been trying to help to access the relief schemes.
Thank you, Sheila. Okay, let me first talk about my own experience when the lockdown was announced. I was very frustrated, uncertain, concerned about so many things. And I decided, you know, I'm so frustrated, I cannot sit alone here. Let me get entrepreneurs from Philippi area, Kailicha, and form a platform where we can share our challenges, share opportunities, share information, share resources, and see how we can together deal with this and support each other. And I've been part of that platform since March, and it has been a very interesting and a challenging moment for SMMEs, especially in the township. You mentioned something, Elfie, that the pandemic came while we were already dealing with challenges of lack of resources, financial assistance, skills. You spoke about resilience. Do we have that? Do we have what it takes to be there? Are we emotionally intelligent enough to deal with the crisis now? And it has been such a challenge for small businesses. The first announcement that was made about the relief funds, we all got excited. Oh, wow, relief funds, here is the amount of money. But I am telling you that excitement didn't last for a very long time. When I personally tried to apply, but I could not apply. And you are talking to me as a business that comply. We comply. I'm up to date with SARS. I'm up to date with UIF and everything. I've got financials. I've got management accounts. But 80% of the businesses that I am part of, they are not compliant. So that means that the system or the application process has already kicked them out. They cannot apply or access that opportunity or that funding opportunity that is there. the lack of resources, the time frame, what it takes for you to complete that application form, and what I also learned from the process was that the communication for the different funding opportunities was not clear. It was not clear. You're not sure if it's a loan, it's a grant, or it's a grant. And if it's a loan, what is the interest rate? How long will it take for them to get back to you? We have businesses that applied for assistance in April. And I really thought that these reliefs were there to assist during this time, but not one business from all the businesses that I'm in contact with have received any from those funding opportunities, except me, that I did get for my staff UIF 2 weeks ago after a struggle, but I have managed to get that UIF. It's been very challenging, and I really hope that there are government people or corporates or whoever that is influential, that the purpose of the relief funds, we are starting to question if it was for the business rescue or what, because we are suffering now as small businesses. We are suffering. There was no income in April because I am in transport and tourism. That means all my international bookings were cancelled. Domestic bookings were cancelled. Others were put on hold. I work with corporates. People were not traveling. I work with tertiary institutions. No tertiary institutions are opened now. So that means no programs are happening. That means there's no work for me. That means there's no income. That means there's no money to pay employees. And the announcements and the communication that is out there, it has been challenging for me personally to manage expectations of the employees, because they are hearing all the nice things and they think that we have already benefited, or there's money or assistance that is coming our way. So it has been a very challenging 2 months. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think also thank you so much for letting us in and being vulnerable and telling your story and that of your employees. I think this is where we need to be as a country. We can no longer remain silent about what is going through. Even when you are not experiencing it, we just cannot keep pretending as if things are okay. I mean, I also grew up in Nyanga, in the townships, and sometimes I speak about my own experience, and it has now become a joke that I grew up actually in Cape Town, and until high school, I didn't know where the waterfront was, and how do we explain that? And now that I think I can count myself as one of the privileged people, because I've worked hard, I've worked my ass off so that I can be here. But how do we change that? How do we make sure that, generations to come, how do I make sure that my son doesn't go through the same thing? Dana, I know Uthando has been profiling social entrepreneurs in the township. If you don't already follow Uthando, please follow them on social media, on LinkedIn. They share stories of entrepreneurs in the township, and they let the entrepreneurs tell their own stories. In your own reflection, Dana, and what you've been doing, what has been coming up, and once again, going back to the point that I made earlier on, how do we reimagine support for entrepreneurs with entrepreneurs, not just sitting there and, coming up with whatever my desktop is telling me that this is what they need? How do we bridge the gap?
Yeah, that's perfect, Sheila. Thanks. Yeah, so we started profiling entrepreneurs, so social enterprises, NPOs, NGOs when lockdown started, in a variety of industries, so food distribution, health and hygiene, education, and just we started the journey really to help give, as you mentioned, just a stage to those that really need the support right now. But what's been interesting through the conversations is we've had some themes emerge or best practices for the entrepreneurs or the enterprises that have actually, identified it as an opportunity or managed to at least survive through the lockdown period. And I think one of the first points that's really come out, and it touches on what you just mentioned, in giving those entrepreneurs and those social enterprises the support that they need. So one of the things the final question that we ask everybody is, how can we help, or how can others help that watch the video? Because we want to give that platform to get those needs out there. And funding is definitely one of the top needs. I think it pretty much has been mentioned through all of the conversations. But what's interesting is a lot of what's needed is actually not necessarily monetary. So a lot of people need access to networks, and a lot of people need access to space. A lot of people just need mentorship. So it's interesting in that, many times, and money is important and income is important, but many times right now it's really spreading that word and getting that word out. And what we've seen from the social enterprises that have done it well is they've really gone back to, what data and context have I gathered? So they look back on their social media followers on Instagram, on Facebook, and they really just start getting that word out there. They're creating that awareness. And then with that, it's really just being accessible. So I think a lot of times we think of innovation and, changing the world, especially during COVID-19, as this big undertaking, which can sometimes feel very overwhelming. But I think right now, especially when people are so confused by a lot of what's going on in this world, the simplest approach is the best in a way. So we've actually seen most success with people that are just available on WhatsApp. They've created a business WhatsApp account. It's low data usage, responsive, immediately they're getting in communication. So it's that accessibility and really getting back to that basic. And then similar to what Sandy had mentioned in her, when she was sharing her journey, we've seen a lot of collaboration start to emerge, and that's how people are really starting to deliver on their mission. It did take time. That first 3 weeks, I think, was really challenging because you're just sifting through a lot. There's a lot of uncertainty. It's overwhelming. But we've seen collaborations, for example, with the food and the education sector. So delivering lessons to learners while they're also getting a hot meal to be able to really absorb what they're being taught. Also with the health and hygiene aspect, so distributing sanitary pads along with the school lessons that are being shared, just providing that knowledge to young female learners so that these efforts don't pause during the lockdown period and during quarantine. And then I think the final one is really, and I'm sure everyone out there is racking their brain and thinking, how can I continue to survive as a business? But it's really just innovating and stepping back and saying, okay, what other ways can I still find revenue? So some of that is through delivery. Some of that is, partnering with other businesses that have a complementary service or product. We've seen some businesses that were previously had a location that people visited have now started delivery. They actually have seen that as a viable revenue stream going forward. So I think once we work through that mindset of this is a very challenging time for us, it's also, I think, a time of opportunity in a way. And I think it's a time for us to kind of go back to what Alfie was talking about with, how do we build a resilient and inclusive city? It's really, I think, time for us to break it down and say, okay, how do we want it to be going forward, and bringing the right people to the table in that conversation. And that's why, the interviews that we have been doing for us have been extremely valuable, because it is getting that voice and that input. And Sheila, I do think we need more government attendees on these webinars. But yeah, so that's what we've seen from our conversation so far.
Thank you so much. I think we can, I have so many questions and I can talk the whole day. But if there are people that would like to to ask questions now. We don't need to wait until the end. But I think so far what I'm getting is that, you know, I think as a country, as policymakers, as government, as everyone, as individuals, we need to be reflective about where we come from, where we are, and what we want for the next generations to come. I mean, things cannot stay the same. We just cannot afford that. It's not sustainable, and it's actually very unfair. And I mean, I'll sound like a broken record because we have been talking about it. I was chatting to a friend today, and I was reflecting on, you know, what has been going on in the US and what is happening here in South Africa, because it is happening also in South Africa. We've lost people in the hands of the police, and I'm bringing it up because I think for me it's also, it talks about, it's all about inclusion. Like something is missing there, something is not landing to some people, to acknowledge that actually we are all humans, and that is why we are sitting today discussing this, because things have not changed. Things have not changed for entrepreneurs. Things have not changed for the most vulnerable in this country. And in being reflective, how do we move forward? So we've put the debt on the table now, and you can see I'm very passionate about this. I'm feeling a bit emotional right now, but how do we become constructive? So we'll go back to you, Alfie. Where do you think, what is the low-hanging fruit? What can we do right now? You are muted.
I think in there's a couple of things, right? In the context of, let's start with in the context of social entrepreneurship. Now, I think that we need to start thinking about our social entrepreneurship as the agents of change. They are the ones that are sitting in the communities. Sandy, for example, who is part of the panelists, they understand the needs in the communities. Why are we not using them as a conduit between the community and government, corporations, foundations, and NGOs? We need that multi-sectoral collaboration approach to some of these problems. So we need to accept and start using some of these social entrepreneurs as agents of change. Number two, we need to accept that COVID-19 has really just become a force multiplier for inequalities. It has brought to the fore some of those inequalities. I don't know what's happening.
We in the in out. That's not good.
Sandy, your mic is on.
Are we good now?
Yes, we are. Alfie, go on.
Okay, great. Yeah. So as I was saying, we need to, I think, first of all, just to recap, we need to accept and start thinking about social entrepreneurs that are living in our communities as the agents of change. We need to accept that. Secondly, COVID-19 has really brought to the fore some of these inequalities that have always been there, that have always been simmering under the surface. So it's an opportunity for us to have these tough conversations. It's an opportunity for us to rebuild better. It's an opportunity for us to use social entrepreneurs as a means to access our communities. Now, what do we want to achieve when we have these conversations, when we do these things? What do we want to achieve? A couple of things. So number one, we need to minimize human vulnerability. So we need to understand, all right, to what extent do we need to meet basic needs of everybody? It's a fundamental right. how do we minimize that vulnerability, not just in times of disasters, but also in times where there are no disasters? Well, by creating economic opportunity, by accepting each one as an equal member of our societies that deserves a fair shot at life, that deserves a fair shot at education, that deserves a fair shot at healthcare, that deserves a fair shot at entrepreneurship. Now, what does that mean? What means we have to accept diversity in our livelihoods. It means that we have to facilitate access to finance. We have to facilitate access to skills training. We have to facilitate access to business support. We have to facilitate access to social welfare. Number 3, we need to think about safeguards to human health and life. So we need to build integrated health facilities. And this is particularly important because we're talking about COVID-19. And again, if we look just over the shows, we start thinking about HIV and AIDS. We start thinking about TB. We start thinking about Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is threatening to rear its ugly head again. I was reading in the news that another 3 or 4 people died of Ebola in the last 3 or 4 days. So it means that our responses to such emergencies have to be robust. What else do we need? Well, we need a collective identity. We need to start thinking about each other as a community. That's where it starts. I think it starts in the mindset. It starts with a mindset shift. Do we view each other as a collective? We need security. We need the rule of law. We need a sustainable economy. We need reduced exposure to fragility. And this we're talking about, environmental stewardship. We're talking about infrastructure. We're talking about effective land use. We're talking about enforcement of planning regulations. We're talking about how we plan and build our communities. It's not acceptable that when it comes to planning our communities, it's just not acceptable that we can have a family of 5 living in a 2 square meter dwelling, because we can't call it a house. And yet across the city, we have a family of 1 or 2 living in a 300 square meter house. Now I understand economic opportunity and I understand risk and reward for entrepreneurship and education and all those things. And some people say, well, the poor should just work harder. But how do they work harder when they do not have reliable resources, they do not have mobility, they do not have communication, there is a lack of leadership and management, we're not empowering the stakeholders, we're not empowering the communities, we don't have integrated planning? How do we expect the vulnerable communities, the marginalized communities to just work harder? And so I think Sheila, it's a good question in terms of, what do we have to do? And there's a lot of work to be done. I wish we could just switch a button and then we are where we need to be, and unfortunately not. It's going to take a lot of thinking. I think a lot of mindset shift and conversations like this, I think, bring to the fore some of those challenges that people might be oblivious to. And I think that this is the beginning. I think as many conversations are happening around the world, I think we can take the opportunity that COVID-19 has presented us with to rethink the way we live our lives, to rethink how as individuals, at that micro level, we can effect change. Small steps, small wins. We can do something within our own capacity, within our own resources, within our own means, to start changing the world, to start changing those little things so that we can begin to see the world the way it should be and not the way it has been designed before.
Thank you so much, Alfie. I just want to bring a comment and a question that came through from the chat box. It's Shai, who is asking Sandy whether she has business interruption insurance, and if so, have they considered covering any of their losses? Sandy's response to that is that they've spoken to Old Mutual and will appreciate more advice. Shai, is it possible if you could unmute and just give us briefly of the comment that you've made on the chat box?
Okay, thank you. I'm responsible for insurance at the University of Cape Town. And this has been one of the issues where we face major challenges in terms of claiming under business interruption. Our policy specifically provides for a pandemic. So in terms of the policy response, we show that the policy will respond and will cover some of the losses, although it is only limited to 5 million. And the potential loss is going to be a lot more substantial than the 5 million. I think what I've seen, and in my engagement with quite a number of colleagues from other universities, from industry, is that the insurers are now beginning to put in exclusions relating to pandemics. And therefore, it's becoming a challenge. I think there was a program on Sunday, Carte Blanche, where they covered precisely this very issue. And it's quite clear that a number of businesses are finding it quite difficult from the insurers to be able to lodge claims. Where some claims have been accepted by insurers, there has been a substantial amount of information that they had to provide. And it seems like, based on what they're getting, that the insurers are going to make this policy exclusion from when we renew our policy. So I think going forward, none of us will have cover related to pandemics or any virus outbreaks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shai. Suwema, I hope I am reading your name pronouncing your name correctly, has commented the question about the reimagining systems design in is a very interesting one, because the reality is that much of the societal ills are structural. The question I have, how do we disrupt the existing system in a way that ensures community buy-in and integration? The reality of social change is that hardly ever is welcomed by privileged, and the era we live in also attracts global outcry that cripples the economy. Over to the panelists.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting comment. Thanks, Shoma. I think if we're going to overcome this, we need to be honest, right? And you are being honest in your comment that the ills are structural. This is honesty, and I think that we need to start. And I'm speaking from a privileged position here. I think we need to start realizing that by creating opportunity just for the privileged, in the long term, it's not sustainable. So let's take, for example, if you are producing a product, you're not just gonna sell it to the privileged alone. Realistically, you're gonna need, and if it's a product meant for the privileged, the more the numbers in the privileged bracket, the better for your product anyway. So by creating an ecosystem where everyone is of good economic means, everyone can take care of themselves, everyone has access to resources, everyone has access to the basics of life, we are in fact creating a better world, not just for the previously underprivileged, but even for the privileged themselves. So it starts with that mindset shift in saying, how do we start looking at these things not as a win and loss, not as a push and pull, not as a pivot that, well, one has to be higher for another one to be lower. One has to be lower for the other one to be high. How do we start unraveling some of those myths about economic opportunity? And so I think that it starts, I think, with a mindset shift. I think it could also start with some sort of I think, leadership. And I think we also need to start unbundling some of those tensions and some of those structurally flawed systems, because the reality is it's just not sustainable in the long term. As we see now with what's happening in the United States of America, it's going to come to a boiling point, and when it does, no one is going to be safe. So we need to start, before the system unravels, we need to start unbundling those structural errors. And I think that you make a good point that it might be harder for the privileged to accept, but I think we're getting there. I think through conversations like this, I think through, again, leadership, I think we will get there. I'm an optimist, so I think that I think we will get there. I think we're starting to see a shift as well in the thinking and the approaches that business is taking. I think we're beginning to see a shift in the thinking and a shift in the way we're doing things, and a shift in the way we're doing business, and a shift in the way we view communities and members of those communities. So I'm optimistic. I think it's a slow and painful process, but I think it's gonna be had.
Thank you so much, Alfie. Sandy and Dana, would you like to add on that?
Yeah, I think Alfie, that was a great response, and I think you definitely kind of, highlighted the need for that structural change is starting to happen slowly. And what's interesting, so to answer the question around how do we, almost in a way convince the privileged that this is required or needed right now, that's some of the work that we've actually started to do in the impact measurement space. And I think, sadly, in a way, it's almost building a business case for why this makes sense. A lot of people, I think, that are privileged have that sort of mentality of like, okay, dollars and cents wise, how does this impact me? So if we can put that in front of someone and say, this is what it means, and this is why it's better for everybody, in a language that everyone, that they would understand, it's pretty powerful. So we've demonstrated, by employing people in South Africa, there's actually 3 times the societal benefit, reduction in people living in poverty, reduction on the the taxation from the government. So there's benefit for everybody, but it's really, I think, quantifying that and putting that into a way that, people can absorb it and it makes sense for them to buy in. And I think that onus lies on the people that are in that privileged place and have the skills and resources to do that sort of demonstration, to really, start to bring others on board, which is, I think, is important with the conversations that we're trying to have in our spheres, to educate people. And yes, what's happening in the US right now is, it's a really challenging time, very scary, very, very sad. But it has been, I think for a long time, there's been, it's almost just coming to this boiling point now. And in a way, I think the uncomfortable situation is good for the fact that it makes people start to think. It makes people that were comfortable start to question, and it's incredibly sad that it had to come to this point for that to happen. But it's starting those conversations now, and it's making people second guess, what was I taught? What does that mean for other people's lives? So it's a slow and painful change, but I think, like Alfie said, we're working towards a more inclusive society and more equality.
Thank you so much, Dana. Sandy?
Hi, Dilega, thank you very much. From my side, I think how we can disrupt is exactly what we are currently doing now. Like, for instance, I started a business. I saw the need to start a business and to create jobs. I decided to start the NGO to help those young people succeed in life so that they can break the cycle of poverty in their families. And by doing that, that will influence the whole community. And we can start by inviting. I'm saying, when I started the NGO, I started from nothing, no funding, nothing. But I said, I have a privilege of knowing those who have, and also a privilege of knowing those who do not have. What can I do as an individual? What can I do to have those who do not have benefit from my networks, benefit from my privilege of being able to start a business, and a successful business. And I'm saying my business is successful, not because of the money that I have in my bank account, but I'm saying it's a successful business because I have created jobs. I am responsible for families, to feed families. As small as I am as L&S Shuttle, I was able to support my NGO and be able to help those young people in the community with their families. So we have a responsibility as individuals, as companies, as corporates, to pull those with us that do not have, so that they can participate in the economy of this country, not only for their own benefit, for the benefit of the country, for the benefit of the society, for the benefit of the whole community. Because if we don't look after these communities, there are so many social ills. I mean, there's gangsterism, there's house breakings, there's everything. If what happens to those young people that are failing matric, they end up getting involved in gangsters, they fall pregnant, and the cycle of poverty repeats itself. What can we do? Because if we empower these communities, and we should not wait for government, and we should start getting our voice heard, that these are the challenges. What can we do together with government, with corporates, with each and every individual in this? We have a responsibility to disrupt and make a difference where we can, with what we have, and demanding what is out there for us. Like, for instance, now we're talking about the funding opportunities. They are there. They are there. They are for us. We need them. They are for us. We need to voice our concerns and our challenges and disrupt the system. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the panelists for the realistic responses. And to be honest, I'm also feeling amped up and quite positive. Before I hand over to Sheila to ask any other further questions, where would you like to unmute and tell us how you're feeling after that response? Let's jump over to Dumisani. Dumisani says, I think inequality exists because of limitation to access to resources. The best way to dismantle the system is to give the less fortunate resources for them to reach their ultimate potential. The resistance to change exists because there's this idea about equality being synonymous to replacement. The privileged have a fear of being replaced and ultimately losing privileges. Any comments? Alfie is diving to.
No. I don't know. I think I think that first of all, necessity is the mother of invention, and so I think we need to start thinking about what can we do in our own space before someone can come and hand over something to us. I think we need to separate the two issues. So on one hand, yes, there's a need to extend support. There's a need to create that ecosystem that enhances and supports social entrepreneurship, especially in the underprivileged communities. But I think there's also a conversation to be had about what can we do within our means within those communities. And I think there is. I think there is stuff that we can do, because the reality is that we are not always going to have a situation where someone hands over resources and opportunity on a silver platter to us. It's great if it does happen. The reality of it is it's not always going to happen. So I think we need to start thinking about what we can do within our ecosystem, within our resources. What can we use that we already have? And I think for the most part, sometimes we have more resources and opportunity than we actually realize, because I think we've been conditioned to think that, you know, someone privileged has to come to my rescue. And the reality is it's not always the case. Sometimes we gotta fight. Sometimes we just gotta work harder. Sometimes we just gotta, you know, use the opportunity that we have, and it will happen over time. It's you know, again, it's a systematic issue. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of years, you know, of sustained sustained status quo in this instance. And so I think we need to approach it, you know, twofold. One is, well, what opportunities are out there for you to get, but also what can you do? What opportunities can you create for yourself within your ecosystem?
Sheila, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I think a comment and also a challenge to everyone in the room. You know, for it's said that it has come to what it is now, and I think the only way that, you know, the structural issues and challenges, the only way that it's going to change, and it's everyone has said exactly that, we need to disrupt. And you don't disrupt because you have or you don't have. Sometimes you need to also disrupt the systems internally. And I promise you, that's what personally I vouch to do, and that's what I do. And it's not comfortable. It's not meant to be comfortable. Sometimes you don't provide or you don't empower people because you have money, you can, you know, dish out money, you can do whatever. But as Alfie said, we have to use what we have. And for me, as a South African young Black woman right now, what I have is power. I have power because I'm at a place now where I have a voice. And every time I have that opportunity to speak for someone that I know, if they were to walk into a corporate and they start asking for something, asking for work, probably people will say, no, we can't talk, you know, whatever, speak to my PA, whatever people say. But sometimes I know if I speak on behalf of this young individual and I introduce them, and it's spoon feeding, but it's opening doors, because now I can, and I'm also here because someone else opened doors. So also as young professionals, when you see, you know, inequality happening, challenges happening, people being bullied at work, and you can, I think it's a disservice to yourself and to everyone around you if you are going to keep quiet. The fact that it's not happening to you right now doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. And I also think that sometimes when we get to sit at a privileged seat, we forget. We forget that we were once where other people were. So I challenge everyone right now, if you know, we also have to remember that people that make up these policies, people that make decisions are also human. And I think that's where the disconnect is. Once you have access to things, you forget that you are human and you actually need to add value to humans as a race, not now in color, in whatever, but as a human. And if we don't do it now, it's never going to happen. So in corporates, in businesses, whatever you have as a young person on a daily basis, ask yourself, how can I change, or how can I impact, or how can I disrupt this system so that tomorrow I don't need to be fighting the same thing? And unfortunately, sometimes when we are now inside, we forget that we were once knocking on that door. So it's just, I think, a challenge to everyone that is here. And I think just be empathetic, sympathize with people, because I think once you imagine what you would be doing if you were in that person's shoe, your perspective changes. No one is going to come and rescue us. We need to rescue ourselves. Thank you.
Love the last line. Thank you so much, Sheila. Sandy?
What was your question, Dilega? Was there a question or during the closing comment?
You are muted.
Dilega, you are muted.
Sorry. The question was, it's the comment around disruption.
I've already commented on that, I think. Yeah. Dilega, you are muted.
She's muted. I think we can do closing comments now. I don't think we have any more questions.
Mm-hmm.
So last words.
We don't have any more questions, last words.
Well, we start with the ladies.
Okay. My closing comments. Specifically for small businesses, as challenging as this 2 months has been, but let us be flexible. Let us be open-minded and adapt to change. This period has taught us so many things. There are new ways of doing business, so we are challenged as entrepreneurs to be innovative. We are challenged as entrepreneurs to relook at our businesses, look at the services or the products that we are selling. Look at how we can change our operations, our approach. What more can we add to what we are already offering? And also, what opportunities are there right now? I am a strong believer that there's always a miracle in a mess. This is chaos, but there are opportunities that we can find from this mess. And we can come out stronger than before. We just need to be flexible and accept the change and be open to opportunities that are there. And again, I really would like to emphasize someone mentioned that, what is it that we have already? What opportunities can we create for us? There are opportunities. And Sheila said earlier on that we might not have all the resources, we might not have money, but the one thing that I have as a business, as a Black female, is power. As a Black female, I have power. So what resources do we have within us that we can use to enhance our businesses and grow sustainable businesses and keep afloat and not give up? And let us not give up. We are not going to give up. We will come out stronger. Let us come together as businesses. Come together. Let's share information. Let's support each other, and together we are stronger than before. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before we close off, Dana and then the gentleman, last comments.
Yeah, so wow, that's a tough one to follow, Sandy. That was very moving, very powerful. I think, yeah, the conversation has been, I think really beneficial today to get a lot of the issues on the table and share not only about inclusion, but just about what's going on in the world right now. I think sometimes, especially during quarantine, when we're all home and in our own thoughts and doing what we do day to day, it's easy to kind of maybe forget about some other things happening in the world. So bringing these issues to the forefront has been great. And I think one of the things is just to see, so it's really important today, and people are talking about inequality and COVID-19 and need in the world, but what are we going to do in 6 months or 12 months from now? So I want to see, how do we keep these conversations going, and how do we make sure that it isn't just a focus right now, because there is such a need and it's been highlighted. And I really think we can use that to our advantage to really drive that structural change that we're talking about. So I just want to, put that as almost as a challenge, like how do we keep these conversations going? Because it's something I'm very passionate about, something that I've done a lot of research and work on, and I'd love to see how we can create long-term sustainable change as opposed to some of the short-term change that we've seen right now. And if there's any social entrepreneurs or NGOs or NPOs that are on the call, or know of anybody that is one that would like to be profiled or have a conversation with us, we love to meet new entrepreneurs and new NGOs and NPOs. So please reach out. But that's it for me. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. Sandy, your last, no, Sandy has already spoken. Alfie, your last words.
Yeah, it's, I almost was just gonna replay what Dana has said, and I think it's important to think about long-term sustainable and systematic change. And I think as Dana rightly said, this is I think what we grapple with at Uthando Impact as well, and I think the question for everyone out there is how do we each hold ourselves accountable for creating a more just and equal society? How do we live our lives in such a way that we are doing something we can, again, within our means, to create a just and equal society? And at Uthando, I think we quite passionate again about effort consolidation, sort of bringing the different players together to try and solve some of the pressing problems the world is facing. So I think there is value in these sorts of collaborations and these sorts of conversations being had. I think we need to as well just mention that, we talk about sort of impact analysis and how some of these interventions and some of these conversations and some of these collaborations, how are they actually impacting lives at individual level, at community level, at family level, and society as a whole. So I think it's important to reflect on these conversations and reflect on the actions that we take in terms of understanding what the impact will be. My last thoughts are, just a quote from Charles de Lint. And he says that, "I don't want to live in the kind of world where we don't look out for each other, not just the people that are close to us, but anybody who needs a helping hand. We can't change the way anybody else thinks, but we can choose to do our bit." Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think we will end it here. Before we end, there are two comments that I just want to read for everyone. Jonica says the how is very important. We are well aware of the inequalities in our communities and townships. We should pull together as a community with support from the private sector and the government. There are many small organizations in communities who are doing amazing work but are not sustainable or known because they do not have access to these networking platforms. The mindset needs to change firstly within the community, provide consistent information channels to the community, children and adults alike. We cannot want better when the people we are doing this for do not see the value in these efforts. Perhaps we can create a platform to engage this organization. Thank you for the session. Let's continue. And I agree. We really need to continue sharing the information with the people that need it the most. But I think as a starting point, it's very important to have these conversations. And as Dana was saying, to continue having these platforms. Two more questions, no comments. Thank you. I've learned so much as the new kid on the block. Thank you for sharing and letting us in this very important on how to overcome challenges. And then, okay, these are just nice comments, very informative. Thank you. The privileged need to act as a bridge between the poor and the rich. Nicely said, Sandy. I just want to thank our panelists. Thank you so much for sharing the amazing work that you are doing as Uthando. Thank you so much, Sandy, for all the work that you are doing. And I think being brave enough to just continue serving your community. Thank you to everyone that joined today. This will not be the end. We will be having similar sessions. And if you think that there's a topic that you would like to have a discussion on, please reach out to the Solution Space or Uthando or anyone that is here and just give us, because we want to give to also keep the conversation open. We don't want to think, what do people want to hear? But we also want it from you or anyone that you think deserves the platform. As the Solution Space, as the Graduate School of Business, we are here just for that. I think that's it. Thank you so much, everyone. We are right on time. We have 8 minutes left, so we can all go have a lunch or coffee break or whatever. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sheila.
Thanks, Sheila. Thanks, Angela.
This session was recorded and we will be sharing it with everyone that is on the call. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.